You're not lazy. You're not unlucky. And you're definitely not just overthinking it. So why does it feel like your life isn't moving? Why does it feel like no matter how many times you try to reset, you somehow end up in the exact same place again? Same thoughts, same patterns, same quiet frustration, looping. You try to change. You get motivated. For a moment, it feels different. You feel that spark, that sudden belief that maybe this time something is finally shifting, but then somehow you end up right back where you started. Same mindset, same habits, same invisible weight holding everything in place. And after a while, that starts to mess with you, because it stops feeling like a bad week or a rough phase. It starts feeling like your life is repeating itself. That's not coincidence. That's structure. Part 1. The illusion of being stuck. Feeling stuck is one of the most misunderstood experiences in life, because it feels like something external, like life is blocking you, like time is passing you by, like everyone else figured something out that you somehow missed. Like there's a door in front of you, and for some reason it just won't open. So naturally, you blame the outside, your circumstances, your timing, your energy, your luck. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people aren't actually stuck. They're repeating, and that's not the same thing. Being stuck means no movement, but repetition? That's movement in a circle. You're not frozen. You're looping. And loops are dangerous because they don't always look like failure. Sometimes they look like progress. You start something new. You get a spark of energy. You make a promise to yourself. You think, this time it's different. And for a moment it really feels like it is, but then the same drift returns. The same habits creep back in. The same version of you quietly takes over again, and before you even notice it, you're back in the same cycle, just wearing a different mood. Because the pattern never actually broke, it only changed its shape. And that's the part most people miss. The real trap isn't that your life isn't moving. It's that it keeps moving in a way that brings you back to the same place. Because the pattern isn't outside of you. It's inside. Part 2, as within, so without. There's an old principle, as within, so without. Most people hear that and think it's just spiritual poetry. A quote for candles, journals, and late-night self-help captions. But it's not just mystical language. It's psychological. Because whether people realize it or not, your inner world is constantly shaping your outer one. Your internal state, your beliefs, your identity, your expectations, quietly determines what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you pursue. Not consciously, automatically. That's what makes it dangerous. Because most people don't realize they're living inside assumptions they never chose, and those assumptions become behavior. If deep down you believe, I'm not ready yet, you will hesitate, you'll wait, you'll over-prepare. You'll tell yourself you just need a little more time before you finally begin. If you believe, I always mess things up, you'll sabotage subtly. Not in obvious ways, in quiet ways. You'll lose momentum. You'll doubt yourself at the wrong moment. You'll pull back right when life starts asking more from you. And if you believe, I don't deserve more, you'll settle. You'll call it realism. You'll call it patience. You'll call it being grateful for what you have. But underneath it, it's fear wearing a wiser face. And this is the part people don't want to admit. You don't always choose what's best for you. You often choose what feels familiar, not because you want less, but because your nervous system trusts what it already knows, and the brain doesn't chase what's best. It protects what's known. Part 3. Your identity is the cage. People think their actions define their life, but actions don't lead. They follow. And more often than not, they follow identity. You don't consistently act like the person you want to be. You act like the person you believe you are. That's the real prison. Because if your identity stays the same, your behavior will keep finding its way back to it. Even after motivation, even after breakthroughs, even after all those moments where you swear you're finally becoming someone new, because belief always pulls harder than intention. And that belief is often outdated, built from old experiences, old failures, old embarrassments, old versions of you that no longer even exist. But your mind still runs that script like it's current, still treating you like the person who failed, the person who got rejected, the person who doubted themselves, the person who learned somewhere along the way to play smaller than they really are. So even when opportunity appears, you hesitate. Even when you know what to do, you delay. Even when you try to change, you drift back. Not because you're incapable, but because part of you is still loyal to an identity that was built in survival. And survival identities don't create expansion. They create repetition. That's why changing your life without changing your identity is like trying to leave a room while your foot is tied to the floor. You can move, you can struggle, you can even convince yourself you're making progress, but you're still attached to the thing that keeps pulling you back. Part 4. Why you self-sabotage. Self-sabotage isn't weakness. It's protection. That's the part nobody tells you. People love to frame it like a character flaw, like you're lazy, undisciplined, inconsistent, broken in some way. But most of the time, that's not what's happening. Your brain is not primarily trying to make you successful. It's trying to keep you safe. And safe doesn't mean fulfilled. It doesn't mean powerful. It doesn't mean free. It means predictable. Something your system already understands. Even if predictable feels like frustration, even if predictable feels like stagnation, even if predictable slowly drains the life out of you, it's still familiar, and familiar equals safe. That's why people stay in habits that are killing their growth. Why they stay in cycles they claim they hate. Why they keep returning to what they already know, even when they know it's beneath them. Because the unknown can feel threatening, even when it's better. So when you try to grow, your system resists. Not loudly, subtly, quietly, almost intelligently. You procrastinate, you overthink, you distract yourself. You lose momentum right when things start becoming real. And the worst part is, you usually don't notice it for what it is. You call it being tired. You call it waiting for the right moment. You call it needing more clarity. But a lot of the time, it's fear, not loud fear, refined fear, fear disguised as logic. And that's why self-sabotage is so hard to catch. Because it rarely shows up looking destructive. It often shows up looking reasonable, not because you lack discipline, but because a part of you doesn't trust what comes next. And until that part feels safe enough to move, it will keep pulling you back the moment your life starts changing for real. Part 5. The environment mirror. Look at your environment, not just your room, your life, your habits, your circle, your routines, the way your days are structured, the kind of energy you keep around you. That's not random. That's a reflection, a mirror, as within, so without. Because whether people admit it or not, your outer world tends to organize itself around your inner standard, not your intentions, your standard. And those are not the same thing. Intentions are what you say you want. Standards are what you repeatedly allow. That's the difference. If you tolerate low effort, you'll stay in low-effort environments. If you keep entertaining confusion, you'll keep building a life that feels unclear. If you avoid discomfort, you'll slowly create a life that avoids growth. And at first, it doesn't look dramatic. It just looks normal. A little delay here, a little compromise there, a little less discipline than you know you're capable of. But over time, all of that becomes structure, and structure becomes reality. So if you don't see yourself as someone who moves forward, your life won't move either. Not because it can't, because it's aligned. Because your external life is often just your internal world made visible. And that's a hard truth. Because it means your environment isn't just around you. In many ways, it's revealing you. Part 6, breaking the loop. So, how do you break it? Not with motivation. Motivation is unstable. It shows up when it wants to, disappears when things get inconvenient, and abandons most people the moment life stops feeling inspiring. So if your entire life depends on feeling motivated, you're already building on something temporary. And no, not with discipline alone either. Because discipline without identity change eventually becomes exhausting. You can force yourself for a while. You can push. You can grind. You can white-knuckle your way through a few weeks of change. But if your inner standard never shifts, you'll eventually snap back to what feels normal. That's the real work. You break the loop by changing what you accept as normal. Not what you want once in a while, what you normalize. Because that's what your life keeps returning to. And this is where most people misunderstand growth. They think they rise to their goals. They don't. They fall to their standards. Every time. So the real question isn't, what do you want your life to look like? The real question is, what feels normal to you? Chaos? Delay? Half-finished plans? Mental clutter? Excuses that sound intelligent? Or precision? Consistency? Execution? Follow-through? Calm control? Because whatever feels normal will repeat. And whatever you keep repeating eventually becomes your life. Part 7. The uncomfortable shift. Here's where it gets real. If you want a different life, you need to become unfamiliar to yourself. Not completely, but enough to disrupt the pattern you've been unconsciously living inside. And that's the part most people avoid, because they want change without the feeling of becoming someone new. But real change doesn't feel comfortable at first. It feels strange. It feels forced. It feels unnatural. Sometimes it even feels fake. Because you're stepping outside the version of you that your nervous system has memorized. That means doing things that don't feel like you at first. Taking action without waiting for the right mood. Moving without overthinking. Following through when your old self would stop. Staying consistent when the emotional high is gone. And in the beginning, that won't feel empowering. It'll feel unfamiliar. That's the point. Because people often mistake unfamiliarity for misalignment. They think, this doesn't feel like me. But sometimes that's exactly how growth begins. Not when it feels natural, when it feels different, when it interrupts the pattern, because your current normal is what's keeping you stuck. And if your old self created the loop, your new life will require behavior your old self would never sustain. The outro. You're not stuck, you're aligned. Aligned with a version of yourself that no longer serves you. A version built from old patterns, old fear, old assumptions about who you are and what your life is allowed to become. And until that version changes, your life won't either. Because whether people realize it or not, as within, so without, change the internal pattern, and the external reality begins to follow. Not instantly, but inevitably. And maybe that's the truth most people never hear. Your life doesn't change the moment you want better. It changes the moment you stop being loyal to the version of you that keeps recreating the same reality. If this video spoke to something real in you, you can leave a like. And if you feel like subscribing, this is ShadowMinds Alchemy. More soon.